A new type of prison for all citizens is now on the horizon. Well, actually, it's almost here. And the stupid, well, they welcome it. The ignorant, they're ignoring it. But most are too afraid to do anything about it. Yep, I guess that we're all just a bunch of cowards. Prove me wrong, as they say. How am I wrong? We are doing nothing about this. We didn't do anything about lockdowns and mandates, and stop saying that we did. We accomplished nothing because Trudeau and other tyrannical leaders and power-hungry globalist commies are about to install the second phase of their population control, population reduction plan. Yeah, have you heard about the 15-minute cities? They're trying to sell it as this wonderful utopia. Well, hardly. You will be imprisoned. Yep, 15-minute cities. You'll be imprisoned within a very small area within a city. At first, it's voluntary. Next, it will be mandatory, and eventually, there will be military checkpoints. Yep, military checkpoints will be used to enforce it all. They will make it impossible to own or drive a car anywhere. And so now imagine, something has gone very wrong, and you need to escape. How do you escape your 15-minute city? You don't have a car. You can't get through the checkpoints. There's facial recognition cameras, but you're trapped. You can't escape. You have no freedom. There is no food. What are you going to do? It's too late by then. There is nothing you can do because you don't even have a gun. And while we are locked up within our controlled small area within a city, it will be impossible to know what's going on in the next area. Never mind the rest of the country, or the continent, or the rest of the world. It's a type of blackout. The internet's controlled, media's controlled. You can't get out. You can't get information coming in. You can't call for help in any way because you're trapped. There's no form of communication. They have mainstream media in their pockets who are willing to produce fake news in exchange for money. They are easily bribed. And you have to realize it would take no effort at all for a few soldiers to enter one of these 15-minute sections of a city and exterminate everyone under the sound of silence. They did it in Kosovo and Belarus, and no one knew that it even had happened. Revolts against being enslaved and imprisoned within your 15-minute section? Well, any revolts would be dealt with harshly. Citizens would be starved into submission or worse. By this time, all farms and farming are owned and operated by huge corporations. Maybe BlackRock bought those as well. Operated with a unique mix of communism and slavery. Do you feel trapped yet? Oh, you will soon. And they will do this all under the guise of climate change. And under the guise of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Yippee. Land conservation? Does it look like Canada needs to conserve land? 50% of Canada lives here. Yeah, you see those tiny little red dots on that map? That's where most of Canada lives. So why don't we just skip the 15-minute city because we're basically a 15-minute country. Most of the population lives very closely together in a very tiny area of our country. So what's their real reason for doing this? Well, the reasons are very nefarious. So here we go. Canada is the second largest country in the world by land mass. And Canada is also one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world, at 4 citizens per square kilometer. Compare that to China at 153 citizens per square kilometer, India 464 citizens per square kilometer, and Nigeria has 226 citizens per square kilometer. Canada has 894 million acres of trees, the third largest tree coverage of all the countries in the world. So why are we being carbon taxed? Almost 90% of Canada is crown land owned by the federal government or by the provinces. 11% of Canada is privately owned. And at the same time, Canada is about to raise land conservation from 5% up to 30% of all the land in Canada. So how much of that 30% is going to come from privately owned land? Are they going to be confiscating farms like they're doing in the Netherlands? I would predict so. Will those confiscated farms be given to huge corporations, or will a government entity operate it? Meanwhile, birds are being killed by the thousands because of their stupid windmills. And solar panels, they're just plain idiotic. The government is so stupid that instead of letting citizens hunt, it's putting deer on birth control when there are too many of them. Billions of liters of raw sewage have been dumped into the Ottawa River for the last 2 centuries. And you're gonna carbon tax me? Huh. As Greta Thunberg, whatever her name is, says, how dare you? And I want to make a case for our First Nations Indigenous people of Canada. And if someone can give them the message, it is not the so-called colonizers that are your enemy. It is not the rest of Canadians that are your enemies. Oh no, if you really dig deep, if you really read between the lines, if you look at all those treaties and the things that you have been signing, especially lately with Justin Trudeau, if you really study those, you will see that your enemy is the federal government, and always has been the federal government. Canadians are on your side. They're trying to keep us divided. We need to unite, all of us. Are there no brave men? Are there no warriors? Have we relinquished everything while we are in submission, bowing on our knees to the federal government communists, those globalists? Is no one brave enough to do anything about this? Are we just gonna let it continue on? We gotta think of our children and grandchildren, don't we? If the Indigenous oppose colonization, why did they continue to let it go on? In 3 years, there'll be 1.5 million new immigrants. That's more than the population of Indigenous people in Canada. And guess who is a priority for our government? Right now, 1 in 4 Canadians were not even born in Canada. That's 25%. In 1871, it was only about 1% of the population. 1 person in every 100 people hadn't been born in Canada. So maybe the real colonization is happening since Trudeau took office, with 60% of foreign-born Canadians being from Africa and the Middle East and Asia. It is a new colonization, and the Indigenous people are letting it happen. Why? Why are they doing this? If they had put a stop to it years ago, they could have been the majority population in Canada, easily at 50% by now, if they had stopped it right away as part of their treaties that they had made with the Canadian government. They could have just said, close the borders down, no one else is coming in. But they didn't. And instead, the government plans to phase them out entirely. It puts a whole new spin on disappeared. Not just replaced, gone forever. In 1867, the Indigenous, if they really cared, they could have put a stop to all this colonization, when only 17 immigrants per day were coming into Canada. But instead, they let in 17 million more immigrants. That was an average of 300 new immigrants per day on average since 1867. But with Trudeau's plan, he has increased that amount to 1,500 new immigrants per day. And that does not even begin to include all the illegal migrants crossing our border every single day by foot, by boat, or by plane.